Well, we're also watching this. Communications are still down in Iran after a crackdown on protesters earlier this week. So this means that videos from those protests and the crackdown by the Iranian government, they're slow to get out, if they can get out at all. And that prevents the true scale of the crackdown from being fully known here on this side of planet Earth. Iran's exiled crown prince, Reza Pahlavi, held a news conference this morning saying the current regime is lying about the slaughter ending. He also asked the international community for help.
Today, I ask the world to do 6 things. First, protect the Iranian people by degrading the regime's repressive capacity, including targeting the Islamic Revolutionary Guard leadership and its command and control infrastructure. Second, deliver and sustain maximum economic pressure on the regime. Block their assets worldwide, target and dismantle their fleet of ghost tankers. Third, break through the regime's information blockade by enabling unrestricted internet access. Deploy Starlink and other secure communications tools widely across Iran, and conduct cyber operations to disable the regime's ability to shut down the internet. Fourth, hold the regime accountable by expelling its diplomats from your capitals and pursue legal enforcement actions against those responsible for crimes against humanity. Fifth, demand the immediate release of all political prisoners. Sixth, prepare for a democratic transition in Iran by committing to recognize a legitimate transitional government when the moment comes.
So let's talk about this. Trita Parsi, Executive Vice President of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, joins us live. All right, so he also went on to say that the Islamic Republic will fall. It's just a matter of when. What do you make of his comments? He laid out those 5 objectives, and as I listen to them, it looks like they put a white-hot spotlight on this regime that he says is going to fall eventually.
I think the Islamic Republic absolutely at some point will fall. But whether that is something that will happen in the short run, whether that is something that actually will happen as a result of U.S. intervention, which is exactly what Mr. Pahlavi called for, military intervention, is a completely different story. But it is very difficult to see this regime that has such eroding legitimacy and support being able to sustain itself for years to come. The fact, however, is that if it were to fall right now, the most likely replacement would be other elements from the same regime coming out of the security forces. So it wouldn't, in the most likely scenario, be some sort of a transition towards a democratic government. That is just a reality of the ground today.
Well, and then we look at the fact that that reality affects the realities of other nations in that region. In fact, several key U.S. allies in the Middle East have pushed to avoid the conflict between the U.S. and Iran over these protests. What do you make of their intervention?
Well, first of all, none of these governments are huge fans of the Islamic Republic. They have, almost all of them, significant issues with it and has oftentimes been fighting it directly or indirectly. However, their fear is that we're not going to see some sort of a transition towards a stable government. They're really fearful of the fact that there would be instability, potentially civil war, secessionist movements in the border areas, a major destabilization of the region as a whole, refugee flows that would go to those countries that would not go necessarily to the US, but they would go to Europe, and they would go to neighboring countries. And all of this is something that is a nightmare scenario for them, despite the fact that they have their own very significant problems with the Islamic Republic.
Well, and then you add all of that context to what CBS News has learned, that the USS Abraham Lincoln Aircraft Carrier Strike Group is moving towards the Middle East from the Indo-Pacific at this very moment. What do you make of that?
Well, President Trump was really on the precipice of war just 3 nights ago. And for reasons that is not entirely clear to me, decided to pull back, at least temporarily. But at the same time, as you pointed out, more assets are being moved to the region. It may have been simply that he thought that the Iranians were going to capitulate, and as a result, he didn't need to have a significant amount of force in the region. Now he may have come to the conclusion that capitulation is not likely to occur, at least not with the current threat level, and he's moving more forces to the region. But war with Iran, particularly if the Iranians this time around strike back hard at the US rather than what they have done so far, which is to do these symbolic strikes, would be a very, very destabilizing event and a very costly event for the United States as well. There should be no illusions about this, working out the way it did in Venezuela, for instance, in very different scenarios.
Meanwhile, protests continue in Iran. Trita Parsi, thank you so much. It's good to talk to you. Hope to see you back here on CBS News 24/7.